Okay. Most, not most, yeah, probably most of the material that I've gotten here comes from a book by Wayne Grudem. It's on politics and civil government. If you're interested, I send you the information on the book. Pretty thick. I don't remember the cost of it, but yeah, it's very good. So uh, that'll be my source material along with the Bible. Governments should punish evil and encourage good. That's what it tells us in the Bible. The Old Testament foundation is Genesis 9, 5, and 6. Somebody read that for me off the screen.
And for your lifeblood, I will require a reckoning. From every beast, I will require it, and from man. Fellow man, I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed.
Okay, thank you.
For
So
not
God establishes this obligation to carry out the most sincere or severe punishment and retribution for the most horrible crime. So by establishing this principle, that's easy to impose or implement lesser penalties for lesser crimes. This one being the crime with the capital punishment attached to it. The commands to Noah were given at the beginning of the reestablishment of human society after God destroyed all but Noah's family. These principles have relevance for the entire or the whole human race for all time. Anarchy is a highly destructive evil. That means in opposition to governmental authority. Judges 17:6 says, in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. So whatever people want to do, what they want to do, it is disorder, it is disorganization. It goes against the principle of the most good for the most people. So reinforcing the need for government is to restrain evil. The Old Testament shows that when there's no government or the government is so weak it can't enforce its laws, that there are destructive results to it. And Judges 18 through 25, those chapters, it lists the most horrible sins recorded anywhere. These passages illustrate dreadful results of anarchy, and that's the situation where there's no effective government at all. The Judges 18:1, 19:1, and 21:25. It shows why civil government is so badly needed among human beings. When there's no ruler, sinful people make up their own morality. When there's no rule, sinful people do terrible things, especially to one another. Governments should execute justice and defend the weak. Somebody read Psalms 82 on the screen for me.
How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked.
Good. Thanks, Dave. So there's three things here. Rulers must judge with fairness and righteousness, not showing partiality. They must pay special attention to defending the weak and the fatherless. And they are to use their power to stop the wicked from harming others. And Daniel, in the book of Daniel, teaches this same thing when he counsels Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 4:27. So this is a universal principle that God has established. Now, Bob, you're the new guy, so you need to understand if something along here that you want to comment or you want to ask a question on, just jump in, buddy. That's all you got to do.
Gotcha.
Okay, a deterrent to crime is in swift punishment by the government. That's one of the difficulties we're having in certain states right now in the United States. Ecclesiastes 8:11 says, because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. So this is what's happening. We get it, especially in California, when the prosecuting attorneys don't prosecute, when evildoers are arrested, they're processed, and they're out in less than several hours. Is that there's no deterrent, and there's nothing swift about the punishment if there is a punishment given at all. New Testament teaching says God has appointed the authorities who have governmental power. Civil rulers are a terror to bad conduct, which means they restrain evil by the threat of punishment. They give approval or praise to those who do what's good, while the ruler is God's servant for your good. So what is that telling you? God's appointed authorities, and they got the power. Power to those people authorizing him directly by God. God's on the throne. He's sovereign in what he does. Civil rulers are a terror to bad conduct. Should be the perspective of the evildoer or the wrongdoer, that the civil rulers are terrors to them because they deter what these people want to do. They give approval or praise to those who do what is good, and the ruler is God's servant, and his authority is given to him to do exactly that, to do what is good for the majority of the people. Common good is, for instance, tax-supported playgrounds, parks, schools, national parks, historical buildings, monuments, tax-free status for churches. Those are all things that would fall under that category of being good. Principle is that the government should punish the evildoer and reward good conduct to those that contribute to the good of society. Number 4 is that governmental officials serve God. There's a special judgment for those people. Government officials are doing good as they carry out their work of what? Rewarding good, making laws to prohibit and restrain evil. 6, governmental authorities execute God's wrath on wrongdoers and thereby carry out the task of retribution. Anybody good? All right. Okay, somebody read Romans 13, 1 through 7. That's on the screen for me.
Let every person be subject to the government authorities. for
Get
there
close
is
to the mic, Terry. Attaboy.
no- All right. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities. There is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to the good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. He is a servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For because of this, you may also pay taxes, for the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed.
Very good, Terry. Thank you. Okay, so look at the description of those that are in government that have the authority and have been given that authority by God. See if you can pick out some for me. They're terror, right? That's verse 3. They're not a terror to good conduct, but they're terror to bad conduct. What else? It says what? They're an avenger in verse 4. They're a servant of God in verse 4 likewise. Minister in verse 5. An attendant in verse 5. They're a taxing authority in verse 7.
It seems like some of our government officials have forgotten a few of those.
And I thought that, yes, very good, Dave. Yeah, I think they have forgotten those. Yeah.
They're still good at collecting taxes, but a few of those other things were.
Yeah.
None about.
Yeah, they're really good at collecting taxes.
They're the Matthew, right?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a responsibility for submission to authority. Then Jesus told him, give the emperor what belongs to him and give God what belongs to God. And the men were amazed at Jesus having said that in Mark 12, verse 17. First Peter 2, in verses 13, 14. Somebody read that for me.
Be subjected for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be the emperor or as a supreme, or to governors as sent by him, to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good.
Thank you. Thank you. The governors are sent by him for the purpose of punishing the evildoers and praising those who do good. So this is a principle that began in the Old Testament and stayed exactly the way that it was presented in the New Testament. So I would think that would carry a lot of authority and carry a lot of confirmation for us as to what our reactions and our responses ought to be to a government that does that. If the government does exactly that, then we are to submit to that authority. Those who punish evil, those who praise those who do good in some form or fashion. All right. So governments are supposed to serve the people and seek the good of those people. Governments should serve the people and seek the good of people. Should. That means that's their goal, that's their mission, that's their purpose. They don't all the time do that. What happens is the tail wags the dog. You know, Samuel at the end of his judgeship said to the people in 1 Samuel 12, somebody read that for me.
Here I am. Testify against me before the Lord and before his anointed. Whose ox have I taken? Or whose donkey have I taken? Or whom have I defrauded? Whom have I oppressed? Or from whose hand have I taken a bribe to blind my eyes with it? Testify against me, and I will restore it to you. And they said, you have not defrauded us or oppressed us or taken anything from any man's hand.
So that's, thank you, Dave. So this would, I think, would be a good verse to send to our representatives in DC. They don't say that. I don't think some of them can say that. Whose ox have I taken? Whose donkey have I taken? What have I taken that wasn't mine? Whom have I defrauded? Whom have I oppressed? Now, those are serious accusations. In the case of Samuel, at the end of his judgeship, he is asking people to judge him. And they're telling him, you haven't done any of these things.
It's about his credibility, right?
Exactly.
Or it's about their authorities'
Yeah.
credibility towards the people.
He matched up with that too. Okay, so let's talk about civil government's effect and relationship with private property. They are to document and protect the ownership of private property. Would that fall under that category of doing good, do you think, for the most people? Yeah, I think it would.
Yeah.
Okay,
What
here's a
about-
fact. Go ahead.
Well, they just armed the income tax people with all those guns. I don't know if it was 175,000, I forget, but that's kind of scary to me. I don't know if they're protecting me or not.
Yeah, it's kind of curious when you look below the surface. If they are being hired, 87,000 of them being hired to do what they claim they're to do, which is to audit people. Why do they need all the weapons?
And who are they going to audit?
Yeah, I mean, maybe instead of 180,000 guns, they should have had 180,000 ballpoint pens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a scary thing.
Calculators at work.
What happens is the government gets out of whack on what their purpose is. Right now, it seems to me anyway, that the top is pushing down on the people, and the top should be representing the people, not dictating to the people, not pushing down on them. As
Power
far as
and greed. Power and
Huh?
greed.
yeah,
Power and greed.
yeah.
Money.
So factoid, under the sovereign lordship of God, property is regularly said to belong to individuals, not to the government, and not to society or the nation as a whole. Psalm 24, Psalm 50, and Haggai 2:8. Samuel warned the people about evils that would be imposed upon them by the king. Now, do you remember the shift that they made from judges to kings? Remember that shift? And they said, give us a king like all the other nations that we're looking at. And they were looking at what pagan nations, right?
Yeah.
So Samuel says he's going to do that because God said for him to do that. And he warned the people about the evils that would be imposed on them by the king. He emphasized that the monarch with so much governmental power would take and take and take from the people and confiscate things for his own use. Somebody read that quote for me on 1 Samuel 8. That's on the page here. Now look, when you read that, understand I changed it, okay? And I paraphrased it, and I brought it to apply toward more current or modern times. So make sure you read what's on the screen there. Who wants to do that?
Are you talking about, so Samuel told all the words of God, of the Lord?
Yes, sir, I am.
So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who are asking for a president from him. He said, these will be the ways of the president and Congress who will reign over you. They will take your sons and appoint them to his work, and they will be menials announcing his benevolence. And he will appoint for himself leaders of thousands and supervisors of 50s, and some to farm and some to reap his harvest, and some to make his weapons and armored vehicles. He will take your daughters to work for the good of the country and to cook and to bake for his soldiers. He will take the best of your land and crops and give those that are loyal to him. He will take a portion of your grain and your crops and give it to his slaves. And in that day, you will cry out because of him. Your ruler, whom you have selected for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day.
Okay, so do you see that happening at all?
I think so.
Yeah,
Word by word, almost.
yeah. Now remember, now this was my conversion of the words here to bring it modern day. You can look it up in 1 Samuel 8:10 through 18 to get the real verse, the way that Samuel established it. But notice in these verses here, take and take and take and take and take and take. There's a heck of a lot of takes here, but there's not very many gives. So it's all about bringing it to him and not returning things back to them.
It's a very good observation.
Okay, so the ownership of property is a way for God to give us opportunities to imitate his attributes and reflect something of his excellence on his creation and on his images. Through our ownership, which means it's in our possession, of property and possessions, we test what is in our hearts, and they give us opportunities to give thanks to God for what he has provided. Colossians 3:15 and 1 Timothy 6. So stewardship is the key to ownership. God owns everything, and he is giving us a title to the property restricted upon returning it to him, but no one else. So this is about managing God's gifts. Now, property belongs to individuals, not to government or to society as a whole. Let's look at the 10 commandments here. And the 8th commandment deals with stealing, Exodus 20:15. And the 10th commandment deals with coveting, Exodus 20:17. So how do you think that those two commandments extrapolate into private property? How would that work, do you think?
I don't know the question. You can't steal someone's private property.
You can't?
You shouldn't.
Cannot.
What? No, that's the difference between couldn't and shouldn't. Right, you shouldn't, but people do it all the time.
Absolutely.
I mean, look at easily what's happening today with people stealing of identities. They steal these identities and they go and sign releases, sell the property as if they were the owner, and it's a lie. They're stealing it, right? And what about coveting?
Oh, we shouldn't covet, but if someone's got a fancier car than I've got, maybe I'm going to covet it. But
That's
no, not
right.
to.
Yeah,
Coveting is more desiring something that somebody has, right?
right. It's the desire for it, right? And here's the desire. Coveting desire is, I wish I had it and you didn't. I don't want a duplicate. I want that one.
Yep.
The biblical fundamental moral code being in direct opposition is what? That's an abolition of the private property. If you oppose that moral code, which says what? Property belongs to individuals, not to government. Property belongs to individuals, not to government. That's the moral code. If you are in direct opposition of that, or if the government is in direct opposition of that, then that's the abolition of private property, AKA communism.
Yeah, Dan, this is some people like to justify the values of socialism because they say, well, socialism gets the property of the rich or whoever owns property and redistributes among all the people, the poor and every. So they use that. They gave that picture saying that, well, this is sort of biblical because that's what so that's like a sugarcoat or farce of people that try to justify socialism as a beneficiary thing to all people.
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of myself here because I'm going to address that
Oh,
in
okay.
here.
Sorry.
But however, it's called the Robin Hood effect.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Which is not true. And I'll show you why. So when private property is extinguished, government control of private property is government control of all economic activity. They control what you buy, what job you have, where you live, what job you'll be trained for, where you go to school, how much you get paid, and how much you take home. So private property, the elimination of private property is elimination of human liberty. So private property is extremely important. Now, I want you to hold that because I'm going to give you some illustrations in just a minute here, okay? But look at the biblical version. You shall not move your neighbor's landmark, which the men of old have set, in the inheritance that you will hold in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. What that means about moving your neighbor's landmark, it used to be that's the way you got a deed. Is it said, because they didn't really survey, it said that you owned all the land between the river and the base of the mountain where the cluster of the papaya trees are. That's the way your title, that's the way your deed read. So, what happens if you want the land, you go and you dig a trench and you redivert the river and you own the land on the other side of the river. Now all of a sudden you own more land because you've diverted the river. So you can't do those things. So what does that mean in modern day? In modern day, it means the same thing. It says that you cannot fool people, you cannot defraud people, you cannot change boundary lines to your advantage. Then it says what? This is for ownership. It shall be a jubilee for you when each of you shall return to his property, each of you shall return to his clan. So God said that you as a fool can sell your property. This is in the Old Testament. You as a fool can sell your property, but we're not going to let you dispossess your family because there comes a time when that property will be returned to your family. It's called the Jubilee year. And so the property never leaves the family. Why do you think that principle was implied or was it imposed?
So that you didn't lose your little dynasty that you had, so that you maintain the collection of that particular group of people.
Okay. Yeah, go on a little bit.
Was it to God wanted the Israelis, his people, to maintain their identity all along?
Yeah, there you go. Remember now, this all started with the promised land.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so what did God do? God gave specific instructions as for the boundaries of each parcel of land to go to a specific clan, a specific tribe. And each tribe was given designated areas and land. And God had a purpose for that. He had a reason for it. And because he did that, he gave them possession of it as stewards of it, but it was to be forever theirs. That's the big argument now in Israel. You know, who the Palestinians or the Israelites? I mean, who owns what, right? Well, God didn't give it to the Palestinians. He gave it to the Israelites. And he specifically, throughout history, during every Jubilee year, returned that. So it says, it shall be a Jubilee for you when each of you shall return to his property, and each of you shall return to his clan. For why? Because this land shall not be sold in perpetuity. The land is mine, says God. For you're strangers and sojourners with me. When you cross the Jordan River, you're a stranger and a sojourner. This promised land thing is the same land that he sent this guy called Abraham to go there, remember? That's where he was, in the land of Canaan. So he was putting his chosen people into his chosen land and specifically designed for them. All right. Okay, so now you got that principle. Let's take a look at how we're doing. And I tried to just stay with more modern presidents and times. In 2009, the Fed took unprecedented steps to acquire near controlling interest in some of the nation's largest banks, including Citigroup and Bank of America. Unprecedented steps to acquire controlling interest in nation's largest banks. It forced the government, it forced Chrysler Corporation to accept an agreement to sell a large share of itself to Fiat, which was an Italian company, and to allow a controlling interest of itself to be held by the UAW. What authority does the government have in doing that?
No,
It effectively acquired a controlling interest in General Motors. Obama would announce later that the president of GM needed to resign, and the US president is able to fire the president of one of America's largest corporations. Where do you get the authority for that?
Yeah. Well, that was in exchange for that bailout, right?
It wasn't in exchange for it. It was intimidation because of it.
Well, yeah, the government did bail out these companies that were not to fail, you know, and that's in exchange they gained this control.
Well, let me see if I can remember here correctly. If I remember correctly, that the bailout, quote unquote, bailout loans that weren't gifts were all paid back.
Yeah, right.
Plus interest.
Yeah, that's right.
So they were really loans and not bailouts.
I think they forgave like $10 billion to General Motors. They still owe $10 billion back to the taxpayers. So Obama said, forget about it.
He's a pretty benevolent guy, right? In 2010, the Democratic majority in Congress passed legislation giving the federal government significant control over 17% of the GDP, the nation's gross domestic product, when it obtained significant control of the healthcare system. Where did they get the authority to do that?
They didn't.
Well, basically, they just gave it to themselves.
Yeah, there you go.
They were in power. Yeah, they did what they wanted to do. They abused that power.
All right, let's look at the Clinton administration. We'll go back a little bit further. In 1997, he signed an executive order 13061 that classified millions of acres of private property. You get that? Millions of acres of private property in the Western US as protected land that could not be bought or sold or developed. I mean, is that not stealing?
Yes, it is.
You know,
That's-
stealing by legislation, right?
Yeah, that's like socialism.
Yeah.
It's a undercover socialism.
Then he designated 14 rivers with authorization to add 10 more rivers per year. He designated 14 rivers as federal property and thus named them as American Heritage Rivers, regardless of whether they ran through private property or not. In other words, he took control over the rivers no matter where they went. And let's look at the Supreme Court in 2005 under the Bush administration. There was a decision called Kello v. City of New London. Through the power of eminent domain, the government could transfer private land to another private owner. Now this is the first time that happened. Previously, when the power of eminent domain took land, it was for governmental use and control, of which the government claimed it was for the good of the majority of the people. That was the so-called reason for it. And just value had to be given as compensation to whoever they took the land from. In this particular case, that wasn't the case. They used eminent domain as the method, but what they did was they took the land away from somebody and gave it to somebody else. And what gives them the authority to do that? Now, this was not going through any court or anything. They just took it. And then, who they took it from started filing against it. And that's how it got to the Supreme Court. So it's not just Democratic presidents. I mean, you see a history of presidents, that have done that. Okay. Government should promote healthy economic development within its nation. A primary government responsibility is to act as God's servant. You saw that and you read that yourself. To do good for its citizenry, Romans 13:4, or for our Constitution to promote the general welfare of the nation. That's the way it's described in our Constitution. So what the Bible tells us about productivity on the earth, and God blessed them, Genesis 1:28, and God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. That's about being productivity, fruitful, multiply, fill. The implication here is that developing and producing more and better goods from the earth is not simply a result of sin or greed or wrongful materialism, but something God planned from the beginning as an essential part of how he created us to function. God is a God of orderliness, not disorganization, not disorder. Through the rest of the Bible, God's blessing appears whenever there's an increase of productivity from the earth. And God's blessing was on the people. You guys, some of you guys were with me when we did the feasts. And what was the drift of the feast? They were blessings upon the people based on what? Harvest, a bounty that was produced out of the land. You guys do remember that, right?
Yes. Yes.
I know we've slept since and it erases our memory, but that's what I wanted to make sure that everybody did. Temptations accompany the production and ownership of material goods. Pride, envy, selfishness, lack of love for one's neighbor, laziness, setting of our hearts on material things. Greed has a way of taking over. But when the wealth of a nation increases, it becomes easier for people to fulfill many of God's other commands, raising children, spreading the gospel, building up each other, and meeting together as a church. So it's morally right for governments to seek to increase economic productivity. That's a way of measuring the success of the government, is to see that the government produces something. It helps people fulfill one of God's purposes. It enables people to more effectively obey. It enables people to fulfill the desire to be productive that God inspired. It enables people to work and support themselves. It enables people to overcome poverty, and it provides many opportunities for being able to thank God for what he has given to us as a blessing. So you see how this works hand in glove with individuals to God, and the intermediary to make sure that the measurement of those things maximizes itself is God's authority given to the government. The government's supposed to be the referee. They're supposed to have the striped shirt and the whistle on to make sure there's no fouls, nobody's out of bounds, and that everybody's on an equal footing. And when they get out of that realm, it skews everything. Civil government and a question of economics. You didn't know you were going to get a lesson in economics today, did you? Let's talk about the money supply. The money supply here is the Federal Reserve System, aka the central bank, or the Fed is what it's called. And the Federal Reserve System is the central banking system of the United States, created in 1913 with the enactment of the Federal Reserve Act after a series of financial panics. So the purpose of it was to be the referee. And here's how it's set up. There's three levels to the Federal Reserve. There's a Federal Reserve Board. There are regional banks. Okay. And there is a Federal Open Market Committee. Those are the three different categories that all come together in a definition of the Federal Reserve System: the board, the banks, and the committee. That's the system that's set up. An independent central bank whose monetary policy and decisions do not have to be approved by the president or anyone else in the executive or legislative branches of the government. So this is a maverick operation. It does not receive funding appropriated by Congress, so Congress can't cut them off. And the terms of the members of the Board of Governors span multiple presidential and congressional terms. So who do they answer to?
God.
No one.
Yeah, there you go. That's part of the problem also.
Yeah.
You know?
Correct.
Okay, by the way, for your own purposes, located on the left serial number of the bills are the regional banks where that money was published, so that you can tell where it originated, where it came from. The two mandates that the Federal Reserve System was given was to maximize employment and to stabilize prices. How well are they doing, guys?
They're printing money,
Yeah, funny money.
funny money.
Okay. Now, should the federal government own the U.S. banking system and control every detail? That's the question. What do you think? Bob, you've been quiet. What do you think?
say.
You're not talking about me, are you?
Well,
I know what I think.
What do you think, Bob?
I think they should, the government should control, should police around, right?
Okay. Anybody else agree with him or disagree with him?
I could be wrong.
I don't mind the moaning that I just wish there was somebody could hold them accountable.
There you go. The caveat here, restrictions, right?
Right.
But the fact is, if the federal government does what was mandated for them to do, which is what? Restrain evil, promote good.
Yeah.
Should that type of government own the US banking system and control every detail?
I don't think so.
You don't think so, Terry?
Well, in that case, I think yes,
What you said, yes.
But the problem is that's not what they do.
no, it's not
You know?
happening. Yeah.
So what it's saying to us is that the system is corrupted because it's not functioning in the design that God set up for it.
It's become too politicalized, politics has entered every aspect of it.
Too political, too territorial. It's people are looking for ways to promote themselves. There's a thing called money for themselves. They don't look at the money in the banking system as belonging to somebody else. They want their name on it.
Well, if they just stop using fallen people for those positions, then we
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to get some holy people in there, right?
Yeah.
Should the US government run the nation's entire healthcare system?
I don't think so.
That's a little easier. No, I mean, in the banking system, there obviously needs to be some federal control, or else every state might have their own currency.
That's right.
But when it comes to healthcare, wow, that's to me that was scary when they started down that path, and it still is.
How about General Motors and Chrysler? Should they run those companies?
No.
Should they set wage levels for everybody in the banking and financial business?
No.
They
You
do.
know,
Did you know that? They do.
Such and such, and of course, the president, these jobs have to be union jobs, paid a certain salary for these government contracts.
That's right. All right. Government's the natural provider. I don't know what happened there. Wow. Of all currency that's known and accepted and have a standard of value across national borders. In order for such a system to work, the value of the currency has to be stable. So from that perspective and that standpoint, the government has to be the one to regulate. Now, free markets and regulation. The Bible's teaching on the role of government supports the idea of a free market. This is the Bible's teaching now. Okay. Nothing in the Bible gives warrant to government taking over ownership nor control of private businesses. The Bible gives repeated warnings against the ruler uses power to take. We saw that in Samuel. The Bible teaches that property belongs to the individual, not to the government. We saw that in Leviticus. The Bible emphasis on the value of human liberty also argues for a free market system. Government control is the loss of human liberty. History demonstrates time and again that the free market brings better results than a government-controlled economy or any segment of the economy. So a pure system, a pure free market system will work and will be effective. What happens is that legislators make laws to dink, 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 to just chip away at that free market. It's a free market except for this one example in one instance. It's a free market until this happens. So they begin to take away the free part of it, and it's no longer a free market. It's a dictated market, which says we're going to tell you what your hourly wage is going to be. We're going to tell you what the minimum wage is. So when the government starts controlling any aspect of the market no longer is free. And what happens is that even though they may have the right intent, it changes the envelope in which they're operating. Here's the one that's favored for everybody: taxes. Does government have the right to collect taxes? Well, you can read Matthew and you can read Romans, and the answer is yes. Pretty simple, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Anybody argue with those verses that are on there?
No.
Okay, we won't waste our time there. All right, Bob, here's your Robin Hood effect. The Bible does not give any support for the idea that government should use taxes simply to redistribute income from the rich and give it to the poor. It does not support that, including purposes of the civil government, including redistribution of private property, including a change in economic productivity, a ban on certain things, or a mandate on certain other things like vaccinations. Should tax rate be high or low in an economy? Every time there's an increase in taxes, it takes away that much more human freedom. How does that work? Well, let's say the government taxes me $100 and then gives me back some kind of benefit. That's the way it's supposed to work. In all cases, the choice of what to do with that $100 has been taken away from me. My $100 that I had the choice of doing something with no longer exists. And the government has that choice. They make that choice for me. And the choice has been made by the government. And I have lost that much freedom. Society will never get back the same amount of value that it would have received if allowed to spend for themselves and watch carefully how it's spent. It's been shown that when governmental money changes hands twice, that the cost of that money is depleted by 50%. In other words, every time it changes hands, you got to pay, the government pays somebody. They pay somebody. So what happens is, productivity wise, actually that money is spent toward, let's say, highways. Okay, that means concrete, the surveyors, asphalt, and so forth. By the time that money has actually gotten into concrete, it's only $50 that's left. $50 of it has been an administrative fee, a planning fee, all the fees that the government has, which means anytime there's set a fee, that means a person. Somebody's taken a piece of the pie.
And they regulate union labor.
They regulate what, Terry?
Union labor,
Union labor, yeah.
which is higher.
So the benefits of lower taxes, several economic studies demonstrate that when a government lowers its tax rates, it actually ends up collecting more money. Ronald Reagan administration was a great illustration of that. It actually ends up collecting more money because the lower the tax rate brings economic benefits. It encourages businesses to invest. It provides more jobs, lower prices. Business and individuals earn higher incomes. Higher incomes are taxed at lower tax rate, but because there's more money, to be taxed, then there's more of the money in the tax coffer. So what's this basis of fair? Let's just go back here. The idea of being fair taxation. Excuse me. How do we decide what someone deserves? Each person deserves what he legally earned each year. See, let's go back to the Robin Hood effect now. What the Robin Hood effect says is that somebody made $1 million and they should pay more tax than me because I only made $1,000. And I don't like that guy made $1 million because I wish it were me, and it's not me. So I want him to be punished. So is that fair? The answer is no, it's not fair. Bible says no.
That's back to that envy effect.
Exactly. The laborer deserves his wages. Whatever that guy did, assuming it was within the legal grounds, it was not cheating someone, it was not defrauding someone. If they did this honestly, then they deserve what they got because they had took the risk. He who plants and he who waters are one, and each one will receive his wages according to his labor. Now, I didn't write this stuff, guys. You understand that? I mean, I'm the one that found it, but I didn't write it. So, I mean, there it is. The fair or appropriate rate of taxation does not depend on how much each person has left after paying taxes. That's not the fair taxation schedule. So whatever the taxation is, it should be across the board. You know, in a republic of capitalism, the incentive for that person ceases to exist when you punish them for being successful. Why would they want to assume risk? Why would they want to endanger themselves? Wouldn't it be better for them just to be stable and just sit back? Yeah. So you lose your incentives in the society that we live in. Some provision should be made so that people who earn a very small amount will only pay a small amount. You know, that's the widow's mite. That's in Leviticus 12, verses 6 and 8.
And now we have 50% of the population paying no taxes at all.
Mhm.
Well,
Well, that's the idea behind the flat tax, right? That has been proposed many times.
Yep.
Well, hey,
Going
it's
going
funny you should,
nowhere and never went anywhere because of the special interests involved, you know.
that's funny you should mention that 50%, Norm, because that's what we're looking at right here. The top 50% of wage earners paid 97% of all the taxes in 2006. Now think about that for a minute. Half of the people who earned money paid 97% of the taxes. The top 1% of wage owners paid 40% of the total income taxes in 2006. They earned 22% of the total income reported, but they paid 40% of the taxes. In 2000, the richest paid 15, paid 37% of income tax revenue. In 1990, the richest 1% paid 24%. So what's it showing you here? Every year, the amount of the income taxes percentage paid by wealthy people has gone up since 1990. From
Yeah,
24% to 40%.
Yeah. Well, and you keep hearing just the opposite. You know, people saying, "Well, we need to tax more that wealthy 1% or 2%."
Right. But most of the time, you know, they also talk about corporate taxes and they talk about corporations. And how many times have you seen them on screen saying these corporations paid no taxes? Right? Why did they pay no taxes? They paid no taxes because they invested money into expanding their business, which created jobs, which bought merchandise and materials, and it helped boost the economy.
Yeah,
And you know what? Those were tax credits that they were given by the
by the
legislature.
government.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So, you know, so they, you know, it's the old shell game. You know, I'm going to look at my hand over here. Well, don't pay attention by grabbing your wallet down here. Are the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer? Is factually incorrect. Because when an economy grows, everybody benefits. The standard, those standards of what defines poor, what defines middle class, what defines rich, they pretty much stay the same.
Hmm.
It's just the amount of volume in those brackets is what changes. Okay, so here we go. What do you think will cure a recession? Well, there's two views here of economics, all right, for you scholars. One is by Keynes, the Keynesian view. The government should spend a lot more money to stimulate the economy. And the other is a fair market view put forth by Milton Friedman that says advocates and emphasis cutting taxes to let people keep more of their own money. So one says spend more money, the government now, not individuals. The government should spend more money. And the other one says what? Cut taxes. One says the government spends, the other one says the government does not spend.
well, the
And then
government,
allows the free market. Yeah, go ahead.
well, the government's, you know, spend more of the taxpayers' money, right? Because the government money is the taxpayers' money.
You forgot,
Is the revenue that they get from the citizens that pay taxes.
Right. But you forgot two words, and that is they hope.
Oh,
Because they are always borrowing money in the future.
right. Yeah.
The government is.
Yeah, that's where, you know, the Keynesian view falls apart, obviously, is that on the surface, that sounds good. Yeah, spend more money to stimulate the economy.
Right.
That'll give business. But the problem, as you've said, is that where does that money come from? And it either comes from a printing press with nothing to back it up,
Yeah.
Right.
or it comes from taxing
Taxing the
taxpayers
citizens.
more money,
Yeah.
which means that you're taking money here and you're putting it back in over here. And it's kind of, I don't know, it just doesn't work. And if you just give people more freedom to spend what they're earning, then you have a much better chance, I think. But
You know, when Joe Biden formed, which he has done, formed a group, a committee to parallel the Federal Reserve Board. The difference being it would be digital currency instead of paper currency. What did that, I mean, to me, that tells us the final blow, because in my lifetime, we have gone from the gold standard to the silver standard to the paper standard to the air standard. You know, what backs our currency is good faith now. And the question is, you know, how good a faith is it? Well, I asked the people from Afghanistan what they think.
Yeah.
And our good faith is questionable. It's always political, but it's questionable. So what's the answer? In 2010, Congress voted to raise the debt ceiling to 14 trillion. In 2021, they raised it to 28 trillion. So obviously the answer is just keep raising the ceiling, right? You need it, raise the ceiling.
Yeah.
No, that's not the answer. That's stealing from the future.
Yep.
So the scales are there because that's the answer to recession, is balance the friggin' budget. Do what you say you're going to do. And that's the most difficult thing for government now, because we've gotten out of control from that. But if they would just balance the budget, and the only way they're going to be able to balance the budget is to back off from restrictive legislation. Because when they legislate something, what does it do? It takes away a liberty. All right.
Hey, Dan,
Yes, sir.
or anybody, when did the government start getting in debt? I mean, somewhere it started, you know, where the budget got out of balance and they didn't. Is back in the '60s when
Newt Gingrich and Clinton, they balanced the budget. That's
they
called-
balanced the budget? Yeah, that's right. That American contract that Gingrich had there.
Yep.
But they balanced. Okay, yeah. But prior to that was unbalanced, right?
Somewhat, but not anywhere close to what we have right now.
Yeah. Now it's gone astray. Yeah.
It's rampant. I mean, it's out of control. Okay.
Yeah. And you pay interest on that too.
Yeah. So what is the Bible says it's about a country and about the people of that country. Okay. So what affects the people in the country? Crime, rampant spending, immigration, political opposition, state voting influences, debt forgiveness, taxes, and education. Those are the things that have an effect on the people in the country. And if it has an effect on those people, it has an effect on their income, it has an effect on taxation. And therefore, the economics of the good of the majority of the people is flawed. So when you see these things, you know, take a look at it and you say, what's happening to us? It's not just one thing, it's 8 things. You know, it's not just one thing. It is one thing becomes a crisis. We can't do any of these without creating a crisis in our world today. And then what happens in a crisis? That calls for more government. And more government's the one that caused the crisis in the first place. So there is an endangered species going on. And, you know, you remember the Wizard of Oz, he was behind the curtain. And, you know, it's like saying, pay no attention to the guy behind the curtain, by the way. So let's see. Yeah. But don't you want to go behind the curtain and see what's going on back there? I do. So let's take a look at this. Okay. Now, you got to hold on to this, guys. This is something that's scary to me. There are 4 major players in the money market in the world today. Here's 3 of them. And those are the 3 major players in America. It's a company called BlackRock, a company called Vanguard Investments, and a company called State Street. Have you guys heard of any of these people?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Larry Flint, part of
good
the
for
World
you.
Order.
You're better than me. Better than me. All right. So let's take a look at those. All right. The number 1 player in the market is BlackRock. All right.
Yep.
And they are called the most influential asset manager in the world. They now manage $28 trillion in assets. Now let me make sure you understand what that means. That means that they control more assets than the United States, Europe, China, and Russia added together. Vanguard, the number 2 player in the market, controls $7 trillion in assets. So BlackRock controls 4 times the amount of assets of the number 2 player. One was founded in 1975, and the other one was founded in like 1989. Third player is 4 trillion in assets. All right. So you see BlackRock is a pretty interesting player. Now, BlackRock has been referred to as the biggest shadow bank, that means behind the curtain, and most powerful company in the world. It was founded in 1988 by Larry Fink, who, by the way, is on the board of trustees of the World Economic Forum and on the board of trustees of the Council on Foreign Relations. This quote was taken from their website. Everything we do is guided by the conviction that investors need this clarity at every point in the investment process in order to make more informed decisions. More informed decisions to scale efficiently and to achieve better investment outcomes. In other words, what they need to know is what's behind the curtain to make sure that they make more money. That's what it's saying. Their clients. In pursuit of this goal, we're relentlessly innovating and constantly evolving Aladdin technology. Now, Aladdin technology, does anybody know has anybody heard of that? Aladdin technology? The Aladdin system?
Something about rubbing a lamp.
Yeah. Yeah. Disney had that, right?
Where the
it is-
genie comes out of it.
It is artificial intelligence. In 1989, Larry Fink started a computer up and designed it for artificial intelligence. That means that this computer that he created in 1989 was to grow and develop itself, feeding itself with information and allow itself to make decisions on its own. That's what artificial intelligence is. No assistance of man. You just give me the information. This is the computer. Give me the information. I'll chew it up and I'll spit out to you the result and the answer. So this was pretty innovative in 1989. They now control more assets than anything, anybody, any country in the world. So Aladdin has grown pretty good. He's 28 years old now. He's grown pretty good. He's learned a lot. And I'm going to tell you, just get you ready. You're going to be blown away when you see who his clients are. Aladdin, the name Aladdin came from an acronym, Asset Liability Debt and Derivative Investment Network, i.e. Aladdin. They were retained in 2009 by the U.S. Treasury Department for Aladdin to tell the government how much money to print. Here's the setup. In 1988, they fed into Aladdin the global, what did I do? Okay. They fed every single transaction in the world into this computer from the bond market in 1988 to 1999. So 11 years, it was fed every single transaction in the entire world into this computer. In 2006, every single stock transaction was fed into Aladdin. In 2013, every single exchange trade fund was fed into it because BlackRock bought Barclay Investment Company, and they controlled the transactions. So this computer got every bond market transaction, every stock market trade, and every exchange fund was fed into it. Then they were so good at what they did, they told their customers what they should buy and what they should sell, and they made them a lot of money. And word got out. And what do you find when word gets out like that? When word gets out like that is that everybody wants a piece of the pie. So the Federal Reserve contracted with BlackRock, European central banks contracted with them, and the Central Bank of Japan contracted with them for that computer to tell them how much money they should spend and how much money they should print. Are you starting to get a little uneasy here, guys? In 2008, it was decided which assets to keep and which assets to dump in the US $30 billion rescue package. In 2008, this computer was what decided what they should dump and what they should keep in the economy's crash. They were hired to determine where $2.3 trillion in newly printed money should go by these banks. And they controlled over 70% of all trades on the US stock exchange. There's some secret project that was started in 2017 called Monarch that they will not disclose what that is. Okay, now you got Big Brother over here that's growing and blowing and going, right? So what happened is that they in 2019, BlackRock purchases a company called eFront. And the eFront's responsibility, what they do is that they collect data on all things that are ordinary, including money supply, private equity, and global real estate. But here's what affects you, is that eFront is the company that collects all of the information from people like Kroger. When you go to buy your groceries and you put in your telephone number, or you put in your thing that you put in, they get all of the groceries that you buy and what you paid for them and when you bought them. And they sell that information to advertisers. That's what eFront did. When BlackRock bought them, they quit selling the information and they consumed the information. They put it into Aladdin. So now Aladdin is the one that's accumulating everything that you do goes into Aladdin. Now, it says, it's not my aim to surprise or shock you, but the simplest way I can summarize it is to say that there are now in the world machines that can think, learn, and create. Moreover, their ability to do all these things is going to increase rapidly until, in a visible form, the range of problems they can handle will be coextensive with the range with the humans can apply. What it says is that they'll exceed our capability of solving problems. You realize there's no free will in what is created with AI. Everything functions with rules and parameters. So you want to know who makes the decisions behind the curtain? It's this computer. You want to know who they consulted before they just raised the Fed interest rate yesterday? This computer. You want to know who they contacted on how much money they should print to send things to Ukraine? This computer. I don't know about you guys, but it bothers the hell out of me. Now, the other issue here is globalization, and the major player of globalization is the World Economic Forum. And the guy that started that's Klaus Schwab. The World Economic Forum is releasing a new Davos manifesto, which states that companies should pay their fair share of taxes, show zero tolerance for corruption, uphold human rights through their global supply chains, and be an advocate for a competitive level playing field. That is so good. It's scary because it's not what these people do. Not what they do. It is very, very difficult. The way that they've got it set up is you have a hard time identifying who are the major players in the World Economic Forum. They've got a lot. They'll say, this is a subscriber, this is a partner, this is this is that. But here's what I do know. Here's what I did find out in researching it, is that the major players are major players like, what's that Microsoft guy's name?
Okay.
Oh yeah, Bill Gates.
Bill Gates.
Yeah. The CEO of Microsoft is now on their board of trustees. Hmm.
You guys are scary.
What's that other guy's name that does that social networking thing?
Google.
Yeah, that Google guy. Yeah,
Google guy.
yeah. He's on their board of trustees also. Okay. So the people on the board of trustees are globalization people. They are people who want a global economy. And that's what they purport. And those are the people that are having a major impact in what's happening in our country today, because we're looking at socialization as a stepping stone for globalization.
Hey, Dan.
This guy is a major player in that. Yeah.
And the other scary thing about Larry Fink is that he's a climate change nut also. And his company is pressuring a lot of the companies that they own. And, for them to adhere to the climate change ideology.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good.
Scary.
So here's a few of their missions. This is straight off of their website. Accelerating the benefits of AI and machine learning. That's Aladdin. Limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius to avoid catastrophe. By the way, just so that you're aware of it, when you look at, if you go look up the pollution index for the world, the United States is the 14th on the list. We're not a major, we're not even in the top 10 polluters.
No.
So, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on about the green thing.
China,
Addressing systematic changes and improving digital trust. They want to go to the computer. Somebody was going to say something. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say something maybe obvious. China is probably on the top of that list, right? Polluters of
Yeah,
polluters.
them in India, Pakistan. Yeah. These are the books that Schwab has published and written. Global Economy, World Economic, the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The Fourth Industrial Revolution, by the way, as far as he's concerned, is the computers. and robotics. Okay, so I got about a 6-minute clip for you here.
What if I told you there is a robot that controls
have the
more
sound?
wealth
Did
than
y'all
any
hear that?
country on earth? A robot so powerful that in the last 10 years, it has
Can you
quietly
guys hear
created
that?
the biggest company in the world. This is the story of a robot called
Can you guys hear that?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear it.
Okay, all right.
Aladdin. It's Wall Street's best kept secret, and it's gobbling up every asset class across every industry. Aladdin now controls $21 trillion of our global economy. To put that in perspective, that's more than the $20 trillion GDP of the US or the $15 trillion GDP of the entire European Union. The New Statesman wrote, the total physical cash of all 7 billion people and every company, bank vault, wallet, and piggy bank in the world is around $5 trillion. Aladdin has grown into a system responsible for more than 4 times the value of all the money in the world. This one robot directs the actions of the US Federal Reserve, almost every major bank and investment fund on Wall Street, and over 17,000 traders. It controls half of all ETFs, 17% of the bond market, 10% of the global stock market, and carries out 250,000 trades every day and billions of forecasts every week. Year after year, it hoovers up trillions of data points on every market, every company, every asset, and now even each of us, what we buy, sell, and say, so that it knows what to buy and what to sell far better than any human being. Every major bank, company, and investment fund has come to rely on Aladdin and its all-powerful AI and algorithms to beat the market. And if they didn't, they've collapsed and failed in Aladdin's wake. And you know what the craziest part of this story is? This robot is just getting started. So where did Aladdin come from and how did it get so powerful? Aladdin is the brainchild of Larry Fink, the founder of BlackRock, and its total dominance has made his company the biggest shadow bank in the world and the most powerful company on earth. The story you're about to hear is equally unbelievable and terrifying. In fact, you would think it was science fiction if it wasn't very real and happening today. This story starts in the 1980s when Larry Fink was making millions pioneering mortgage-backed securities at Wall Street Bank First Boston. That's right, the same mortgage-backed securities that caused the 2008 global financial crisis 20 years later. But back in the 80s, he was in an epic Wall Street rivalry with Louis Ranieri at Salomon Brothers, made famous as the big swinging dick in Michael Lewis's book Liar's Poker. Back then, Larry was making millions for the bank and was on track to be First Boston's CEO. And then in 1986, an error in the back office computer models led to Larry making the wrong trades and he lost the company $100 million. The result was Larry leaving the bank as a failure with a stupid computer to blame. With that experience, Larry had just one ambition: to build a super smart robot that could pick out risk and opportunity in the market and do it better than any computer or human could do. In 1988, he launched a new startup, BlackRock, with a tiny coding team to give birth to this robot. Its name, Aladdin, which stands for Asset, Liability, and Debt Derivative Investment Network. In its first 10 years, Aladdin was fed information about every asset, price movement, and risk variable in the global bond market, Larry's specialty. And in 1999, when Aladdin turned 11, Aladdin was getting so intelligent at picking losers and winners that Larry began selling access to its data to other Wall Street firms. That same year, he took BlackRock public on the New York Stock Exchange. Straight after the IPO, the dot-com bust burst, pushing a wall of money from the stock market to bonds, which Aladdin had become the undisputed world champion in. Within years, BlackRock had become $1 trillion company, and as money started shifting back to shares, what did Larry do? He bought the asset management arm of Merrill Lynch, which was focused to shares. So the gift for Aladdin's 18th birthday, all the data points for the entire stock market, and suddenly Aladdin had a new playground, analyzing every stock trade and risk factor for every company on the stock market. As a result, today BlackRock, together with his 2 closest rivals, Vanguard and State Street, both of which also rely on Aladdin's mountain of knowledge, have become the biggest shareholders of over 40% of all public listed companies in America. 2008, the global financial crisis hits, and before Aladdin turns 21 years old, is called on by every Wall Street bank and Timothy Geithner, the head of the Federal Reserve and the US Treasury. As soon as Lehman Brothers collapsed and the Wall Street meltdown began, the US government came calling to save the next collapsing bank, Bear Stearns. It was Aladdin who decided which assets to keep and which to leave in the $30 billion rescue package. And few people know it was a robot that saved America from disaster. With that first success, the Fed, US government, and now even European and Japanese central banks began relying on Aladdin to make the calls on where the $2.5 trillion of new money they printed should go. The majority of it, bonds and funding to prop up the mortgage companies and banks. But wait, aren't these exactly the assets that Aladdin and BlackRock already were invested in? Exactly. But growing protests of conflict of interest were drowned out by the noise of the printing presses printing more money, as the assets controlled by Aladdin rapidly grew to $11 trillion by 2013. In the last decade, Aladdin Aladdin has gone from the leader to the dominator of all financial markets. With BlackRock's Barclays acquisition, it got iShares, Barclays Exchange Traded Funds Units, or ETFs. And with that, Aladdin moved from dominator of bonds and equities to dominator of ETFs, just as all the biggest investors shifted from mutual funds to ETFs. And that's when, in 2017, everything changed. On Aladdin's 29th birthday, Larry launched a top secret project at BlackRock, codenamed Monarch. It led to the firing of his fund managers and replacing their funds with Aladdin's funds. The robot was now eliminating humans from the equation altogether. And as a result, today over 70% of all trades on US stock markets are decided by robots, with Aladdin leading the way. These trades are completed from beginning to end without a human involved, in high-frequency trading far faster than a human can execute. Now, if this was just a story about a robot taking over the job of Wall Street traders, you might not be so concerned, unless you're one of those traders. But in the last 3 years, as Aladdin hit $20 trillion in assets, incredibly, it has begun to consume and control at an even faster rate. First, in 2020, as Aladdin turned 32 years old, the US government and Federal Reserve again came calling as the pandemic hit. Aladdin was again the one to guide the nation in what was now $4 trillion of newly printed money. Where did the money go this time? Inexplicably, for the first time, the Fed began buying ETFs in 2020. Well, that's a little strange. And again, the cries of conflict of interest were drowned out by the money printing. And then Aladdin revealed its endgame. Recently, BlackRock acquired eFront, which collects data on the things that you and I own, including private equity and real estate. And since then, Aladdin has consumed eFront's data on the entire global real estate market. And yep, you guess what happened next. Over the last 2 years, BlackRock and other funds using Aladdin's data have begun buying up single-family homes, where they can afford to outbid the rest of us as they have unlimited financing at hyper-low interest rates. The result is home prices rising by 20% over the last 2 years and pushing now even big players like Zillow out of the market. And here we see Aladdin's endgame, to be the one hyper-intelligent AI robot that not just controls Wall Street assets, but all assets, public and private. Now, I'm not into conspiracy theories, but even a skeptic with eyes wide open can see the signs. We're already at a point where no one can compete without Aladdin. As CEOs and asset managers like Anthony Malloy are now saying, Aladdin is like oxygen. Without it, we wouldn't be able to function. And what about government regulation? Well, Joe Biden has appointed BlackRock executive Brian Deese as head of the National Economic Council, which basically means the oversight of Aladdin and BlackRock is now the responsibility of BlackRock. And Biden has also appointed BlackRock Chief of Staff, Wally Adeyemo, to be Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, which means BlackRock is now the Treasury as well as the Treasury Advisor. And this story is far from over. The genie is out of the bottle. And Aladdin has already reached a tipping point where one robot controls more wealth than any person or country. But as Aladdin's AI capabilities continue to grow, and with its rate of control rising by another $1 trillion to $2 trillion in new assets every year, it looks inevitable that Wall Street's secret weapon could end up owning everything, and we end up owning nothing. So what do you think? Are you indifferent, surprised, angry, afraid, or have a different point of view? And if you found this interesting, if not a little alarming, before you go, do subscribe so I can keep you updated with more news on the exploits and adventures of Aladdin.